me, Karen Bonafilio, Inner Realms, Outer Journeys. We have a different type of guest today. I am interviewing a gal named Julie Kick. Julie, you want to say hi before I tell about you?
Sure. Hi, everybody.
Okay, well, Julie and I met each other and bonded a different way than I have with the other people that I've been interviewing. Unfortunately, Julie also lost her husband, as I did. And a mutual friend introduced us, and I sent her a message, and we started corresponding that way. And so I'm a lot of widows. It's really hard to talk to them and for them to express what they went through. So she's going to talk about her journey with grief today. You okay with that, Julie?
100%. I'm used to it. I wrote a book about it, so you
I
kind of have to talk about
know.
it to write a book about it.
Do you want to tell a little bit about your book before we start?
Sure, I can if you want me to.
Yes,
It's
I
called
do.
Weathering. It's called Weathering the Grief Storm, and it's basically the story of my late husband's cancer journey, and then my journey after he died. And I'm a writer and a blogger, and I actually wrote a real-time blog from the day he was diagnosed all the way through to about a year and a half after he died. And
Uh-huh.
everyone kept saying, you have to turn this into a book. You have to turn this into a book. And so I finally, 3 years after, 2 years, no, I guess about a year after he died, I met with a book coach. I paid a lot of money and flew to San Diego, and he helped me kind of craft the book. And then it took me another 4 years to actually write it because it was really tough, obviously, to write about. So
I know when I wrote the book about Carl, and his passing, having to reread it and edit it, it was horrible. And I thought it would get easier, and it didn't. It didn't. Your body just kept going. My body kept going through the same thing over and over and over again.
well, and I'll tell you that, I wrote the book and I was ready to start promoting it. I was going to be doing podcasts like this, and I did a few, and it was just really heavy because every time I do a podcast to promote this book, I have to talk about losing my husband, and so I haven't really done this book justice. I haven't promoted it really much at all. And that I feel bad about that because I feel strongly that it's a really powerful book. And I have had many people tell me that it really, really helped them. So I feel like I haven't gotten it out in the world the way I need to. So I'm working on that, definitely. And
Well,
that's why
maybe
I'm here today.
this will be a step toward that. So
Exactly.
that's good. All right. So let's ask a little bit about your journey that you experienced. How did your life change after your husband's passing?
Everything changed. I always say that loss is loss. It doesn't matter who it is. Or, people always apologize to me if they talk about losing a pet or losing a, parent or whatever, because
Yeah.
they don't think it's as big a deal as losing a spouse. I don't agree with that. I think loss is loss, regardless. However, when you lose a spouse, it's really significantly unique because everything that you thought you had planned for your entire life dies along with that person. And I remember, I was so busy taking care of him, and, he was on hospice. He died of metastatic melanoma at 51. And I remember the day after he died, like waking up that morning and thinking, oh, shoot, everything I had sort of mapped out for my life is now gone and different. And I remember the evening of his memorial, my stepdaughter, his daughter, who is really like my daughter, said, how Dad would want you to look at this. He'd want you to look at it like an adventure. You can do whatever you want. Our youngest, combined child, because we had a combined family, was graduating from high school in about 2 months after John died. And, I could go do whatever I wanted and kind of create my life any way I wanted. And there's a chapter in the book called The Adventure I Never Asked For. Because, I get that he wanted me to look at it as an adventure, but it wasn't an adventure I wanted to go on, that's for sure.
No, not at all. Oh my gosh. I had never thought about it that way because it changes everything, and it certainly is a different adventure. So, how many years has he been gone?
It will be 9 years he died in 2016. So
Okay, 9 years.
yeah, so 9 years in February it will be. And
Um,
yeah, it's hard to believe.
I think you've done really well for 9 years. And I don't know, it took me a long time to not cry every day. When did you feel a shift that you didn't have to cry so much?
I actually, I'm a pretty, I'm an emotional person, but I'm also um, a realist and I'm pretty strong-willed. And um, and because I wrote the blog in real time, as I was
Oh,
pulling things from the blog to write the book, there were several instances where I literally had written about exactly what you're asking about. And there was one where I think it was about a month after he died. I was at our favorite sushi restaurant and we knew the staff really well. And one of the kids who made sushi said, "Well, you seem to be doing really well. Are you?" And I said, "No, Jason, I'm not actually at all. Just because I'm not crying, sitting here eating sushi, doesn't mean I'm okay. I'm totally not okay. And I cry a lot. I just, have a little more control over when that happens sometimes, not always.
hmm
Yeah, I mean, grief storms hit me even now sometimes.
hmm
I'll be something will happen, I'll be out and about and I'll get hit by that. So, I mean, I think I was able to actually like be out in the world and, and be kind of trust that I wasn't going to burst into tears fairly quickly. But that doesn't mean I was okay. And the other moment that I remember really distinctly, because I wrote about it, I used to sing with a Sweet Adelines chorus, actually here in the Portland, Oregon area. I commuted from Walla Walla to sing with them. They were a top 5 in the world chorus. And it really,
Wow.
yeah, I actually commuted every 2 weeks for most of the time he was sick. I took a sabbatical, a leave of absence for about 3 or 4 months before he died because it was too hard. But he made me promise before he died that I would go back the first possible Wednesday that I could, and I did.
hmm
And it was a godsend. But I remember we had a regional competition in May. He died in February, and
Wow.
I was after our competition we won, which we almost always did. I was dancing at a party with some friends, and I literally remember feeling like he was. I felt joy, and as a new widow, when that happens, there's almost like this. Oh no, no, no! I'm not allowed to feel that way. I'm not supposed to be feeling good. This is the worst time
hmm
in my life, and I felt it, and I literally kind of felt him, heard him right. Not actually. I'm deaf in this ear. It was actually on this side saying that yes, 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 this is what I want for you. More of this. Yes, feel this joy. I mean, I could feel his presence. I could hear his voice, and it was crazy. And then of course I probably cried because of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember hearing a saying early on, just because I carry it well, it doesn't mean the burden isn't heavy.
no.
Yeah.
And there's no timeline. There's no two people are the same. Um,
Right.
you can't have unfortunately any expectations because you have no way of knowing in any given moment what's going to happen. And like I said, even after 9 years,
hmm
I can have something will pop up that seems really insignificant and it'll trigger that grief
Yep.
and
hmm
I lose it.
It's
So
difficult.
yeah.
So, how did you handle that emotional upheaval of losing John?
Well,
What did you do for your self care?
he had a long cancer. Well, it was 2.5 year long cancer journey. And we were told he was terminal from day one. I mean, they diagnosed him with metastatic melanoma and they said stage 4 metastatic melanoma is a terminal cancer. You know, now they didn't, and then they gave him at least a year, is what they said. He lived about a year and a half after that diagnosis because originally it was stage 3 and then it came back and was stage 4. But we had some time because we knew that he was going to die, and especially the October before he died, they literally said, you got months. There's nothing more to do. Go home and like get your affairs in order. And so
Yeah.
I had a lot of time to process with
hmm
him. We talked a lot. about, I mean, the reason I live here in the Portland area in Washington, Southwest Washington now is because he said, I think you should move back to where your family and friends are and where the chorus
Yeah.
is. And so I felt like even after he died, he was still kind of guiding me because we had talked about so much. Like we had a motorhome and a boat, and he sat in his hospice bed and wrote the ads for me to sell them because I said I was never the driver in those vehicles. I don't know how to put the boat in the water. I don't want to do that. I don't want to drive a 32-foot, RV. So I need to get rid of these once you're gone. And he sat and wrote the ads for me. So I really felt like he was still kind of there with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helped a lot. The other thing, as far as self-care goes, I made a conscious decision early on to dive into my grief like head first. Because I knew that I had to get through the worst, icky, most painful part. And I told my stepkids this, it's kind of like a traffic circle. You don't have to necessarily feel the feelings and dive into it. But until you do, you're not going to exit. I mean, they're still there. They're not going anywhere. Those feelings are going to wait for you. And my stepdaughter, she took quite a while. Both of them did, actually. It just, it was too much for them to process. And they were both very close to their dad. She especially was. So, I just made a conscious decision. I took advantage of all the hospice counseling that they offered. And hospice tells you our work really starts when your person dies, because we're here to support the people who are left over, who are left, the survivors. So I did individual counseling, which was the best counseling I've ever done. All they do is grief counseling. It helped me so much. I did the 2 group counseling sort of sessions. I think they were 6 or 8 weeks long. And I was the oldest or the youngest person in those groups because I was a very young widow. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I read a ton of books, anything I could get my hands on about grief, I read, and I wrote and I processed, and, I wanted to get through the worst part of it. And I really feel like I kind of did that. So.
I'll tell you, I know that people do process differently. And I was like you, I was going to experience every moment of that because I knew I had to. I knew I had to go through it in order to start healing. And it was the best decision I made, but not everybody can do that. So I understand.
Nope. And I mean, I think, my book, in the last section of this book is the Thrive process, because the subtitle of the book is learning to thrive within loss.
Yes.
And one of the steps in the Thrive process is to, feel the feelings. I mean, you have to allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling. And
they don't go away.
You have to trust yourself too. That's the T in Thrive is trust yourself. And that's really the truth. You have to.
I know for myself that when Carl died, my identity changed. Did you go through that process where all of a sudden you're not so and so and so, and you're a widow? All of a sudden you're a widow, and it changes everything.
It does. It changes the way you see yourself. It changes the way the world sees you. And I distinctly remember the day after he died, and I wrote about this too, having this feeling of, wanting to scream at people mowing their lawns and walking into the grocery store and just say, you don't understand. And none of them knew what I was going through. But, that feeling of everything being different and nobody else understanding that. Right. Because the world that I lived in the day after he died was completely different than the one I lived in the day before he died.
Yes.
And I also remember none of us in our family got sick the entire 2.5 years he was sick. I swear, we didn't have a cold.
Wow.
It was my son, my youngest son, and John and I, and all the way through his hospice, everything. And we had his memorial 2 weeks after he died. And I woke up the morning of his memorial with that scratchy, oh my God, I'm thinking I'm getting sick. And by the end of that day, I had no voice. And then I got I think all the colds I hadn't had in the 2.5 years just happened all at once. And I was so sick. And I don't go to the doctor for colds, but I did because I was really sick. And I remember she said, so is your emergency contact still John Rankin's? And it gutted me. I mean, I started bawling in the middle, and this poor girl is like
She had no clue.
She didn't know how to deal with it. And,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing has happened a few times, where I remember the first time I had to choke it, like, what is your status? Widow.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, nobody really understands what that feels like to actually say it and be it. And, for me, I was a caregiver for 2.5 years.
Yes.
And all of a sudden I wasn't anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and I had forgotten how to be a wife and just me and a mother and whatever. I mean, I had to sort of relearn, because you live in, when you're dealing with a terminally ill person, you live in this crisis mode of caregiving that just requires you focus on the here and now, right now, because everything else is sort of irrelevant in the moment, because that person, is in the emergency room, or you're driving them to the emergency room, or you're dealing with changing their dressings. I mean, there's just so much in caregiving. So that was a big part of reclaiming my identity too. And I will also say that I started dating a lot sooner than anybody thought I should.
Thought you should?
Oh yeah. Oh,
they said that to you?
If you want to experience some judgment, become a widow, let me tell you. God. Especially a young, attractive widow. But John and I talked about it before he died, and he said, you are a partnership person. You are going to want to repartner probably sooner than anybody thinks you should. And I processed a lot of my grief around losing him before he died, and with him and in his arms, And so I started dating after about 3 months, and oh my gosh, I mean, there were people, it was really interesting to me that they just couldn't believe I would be doing that. And, how dare me? And
they shared that with you? They said things to you?
A few people did. I heard, actually, I had a really good friend in the chorus that I sang with, and she told me that she was sitting on the risers during a break one night and heard these two women talking about me and how inappropriate it was that I was dating, so soon after he had died. And she said, I said to them, excuse me, you realize her husband's dead, right? He's not coming back. And if I remember right, you two are going home to your husbands tonight, aren't you? So I really don't think you have anything to talk about regarding what she should or shouldn't be doing with her life.
God.
I know.
I'm sorry. That's unreal. It's unreal.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
People have a lot of opinions about that. And you know what? I met my current husband almost exactly a year after John died, just a little bit more than that.
I can tell you, that guy looks like a really nice man.
He's amazing. And I know why he's amazing, because John told me the week before he died, John told me, I'm going to send you the perfect person. And it was funny.
Carl told me that too.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did. We feel very strongly that John had a lot to do with our meeting, even though we met on Match, which is where I met John too, on Match.com. But just the circumstances around it and some of the things that have happened since we got together. But, I never, ever, ever thought I would have a love like I had with John, that I would be with someone who treated me the way he treated me, who loved and respected me the way he did. And I do with Mark. And
I have goosebumps. That's so, I love that.
It's a miracle. I feel like I've won the lottery twice in my life. I say that all the time, but it's true.
Okay.
So it's possible. Don't give up.
Oh, I'll share some things later. I'll share some.
I proactively went out looking, though. I did. I wrote a really powerful profile, and I said, I am not looking to get laid. I'm not looking to date fun, because half the guys on Match are there to get laid.
I'm sorry.
Maybe some of the women too, but I don't date women. So I'm just saying, the men that I met on Match, a lot of them were basically there to just get laid. And that was very clear when you went out on a first date with them. And I said, that's not why I'm here. If that's you, that's cool. I'm not judging, but I'm here to find my next person. And I know for a fact that kind of love is possible because I've had it. So, it was interesting.
Oh my gosh. Sorry. My mind's going all over. Okay. So what advice would you give to someone who has recently become a widow?
I mean, again, there's a whole section in my book with the
We're going to get to that book. We are.
Yeah, I know we are. So that's really the Thrive process is the advice I give. And it's an acronym, and we can talk about it in a minute, but it's really about, trusting yourself, learning to listen to yourself, tuning out other people as much as possible. Because, unless they're being supportive, but a lot of times the input that you're getting, people don't know how to deal with someone who's grieving. They say stupid things. that are hurtful and they don't mean
Yes.
to. It just
Yes.
happens. And so, a big part of it for me was kind of going internally. And I'm an extrovert, so that was hard.
Yeah.
And the other thing for me was making sure that I had plans. And, because if you don't have things planned, if you're not, kind of paying attention to how you're spending your time, it's really easy to kind of go down a black hole, and
Yeah.
and yeah, and I'm not saying I never did that, but I definitely, like on the weekends, especially when I wasn't working, I made sure that I had plans with other people.
And we all handle it differently too.
Yeah.
So that's true. I had someone recently tell me it's time to move on, and I was shocked. And I thought, how dare you? This is me. This is my life. Don't tell me what I should be doing with my life. I'll decide when I'm ready to move on or not.
Well, that's the biggest thing that people don't understand if they haven't ever gone through it, and I know that you've probably heard of, the podcast is called Terrible Thanks for Asking. And her name is Nora. I can't think of her last name, but she did a very famous TED Talk about that topic. And she said, I will never move on. Mm-hmm. I will move forward. And I have, but there is no moving on from someone who was, part of your heart and soul, who is ingrained in who you are. You don't move on from that ever. Yeah. And, if you're still crying and grieving 2 years later and someone thinks that's too long, well, how about you lose your husband and then you talk to me about what you think is appropriate.
Exactly. I found also that people that hadn't lost their husband had a really hard time discussing it with me. Really hard time.
My husband was an identical twin, and they were mirror twins, they called them. So while John was the most optimistic, positive, happy person in the universe, his brother was the polar opposite. And he never liked me because he had a real problem with strong women. So you can imagine how that went over. But his wife we had a, fairly challenging relationship. She was really intimidated by me, which she told me. But she said to me the week before John died, we were standing in the kitchen, and she actually said, this is just so hard for me because it makes me think about what if it were Tony, and I'm really struggling. And I thought, God, you know what, lady?
Jeez.
I'm really sorry, but I'm not sorry. I mean, I don't know even what to say to that.
Yeah, my husband's dying, and you're
and you're basically saying, I'm so glad it's not my husband, and I can't imagine if it were. I mean,
wow.
So yeah, I think people do have a hard time, and like I said, they say the most stupid, inappropriate, horrific things, and they don't mean to. It's not done with malice aforethought. They just don't know.
And I remember writing a chapter on what not to say to a widow.
Oh, definitely.
But at that point in time, no one had told me to move on. But I would definitely add that.
That should be on the list for sure. And I just can't imagine. I used to say, I'm going to call my book, I Just Can't Imagine. Because I got news for you. I couldn't imagine it until it happened to me. Of course, you can't imagine it. I would hope you don't sit around trying to think about or imagine it. And, I get it because I've started to say it myself. I don't anymore. But, that phrase is really hard for someone like me to hear. The other thing I heard all the time was, you just need to give it to God and trust Him. And it was,
sorry.
No,
it's okay. It's okay.
Your dog doesn't like that either.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, you don't know my spiritual beliefs. That is not helpful advice. Or people saying, our pastor had metastatic melanoma and we all prayed and he was miraculously cured. And I wrote a post and said, those types of comments only make me angry at God. That, what, is my husband not as good as their person? I mean, that's not helpful.
Right. I think one of the most hurtful things that people kept saying, and I think that it was all with good intention, he wants you to be happy. And this was right after he died. And then I would, in my head, go, then he shouldn't have fucking died. But I did not say that to them. I had graciousness or whatever, grace not to say anything. But that's what I thought, and don't say those things. Just don't say that. He wants me to be happy. Then he shouldn't have died. Okay, let's talk about your book, Julie.
Okay.
So I found out a little bit about your book and your, what message or messages did you want to convey in your book? What were the most important things you wanted to convey?
Um, that it's okay no matter where you are. There's actually a testimonial that the publisher, the boutique publisher that I used, that you used as well, Merrick Publishing, they have readers, or they find readers, and then they have them read the book and write testimonials ahead of its release. And one of the readers that they found, because they're a Canadian company, well, I don't know if they're a Canadian company, but they're both from Canada, the people that the founder and the woman that we worked with, Ashley. And there was a woman in Canada right at the time they were getting ready to release my book, who her husband had gone out for a drive during COVID and never came back, never came home. They found his car up on a mountain. They lived outside of Vancouver, abandoned. And basically they never found his body. They never found him. And I think at the time she got my book, it had been maybe like a year, 4 or 5 months, something like it. It had been a short time. And she wrote in her testimonial, of all the books I've read, this is the only one that has basically given me permission to be wherever I am, to feel whatever I'm feeling, hasn't tried to solve my problem or my pain, has just basically acknowledged that it's all okay. And the book is written in 3 parts. So the first part is John's story, our love story, him getting sick, going through that whole cancer process. And the last paragraph, the last chapter in that section is brutal, because he dies. And, I say in the foreword of the book, spoiler alert, the hero dies halfway through the book. And I wish I could change that, but that is the truth. And then the second part of it is my story after he died, and basically how I worked through all, and that's I think the really helpful part for most people going through it, because they feel acknowledged. They see that, I felt the same things they did. They see how I handled it. And one of my core beliefs as a human is that everything that happens in my life is there to teach me. And my job is to figure out what I'm supposed to be taking from it. Even the most worst, most horrible, awful things that happen in my life are there to teach me. Right. And so to be able to look at that situation through that lens definitely helped. It definitely helped me. And that's really the message I think we take away. And then, like I said, we can talk about the Thrive process, because that's what I developed. So I wrote basically I had the first 2 parts of the book were written in the blog. I obviously tweaked it, but that I wrote it as I went. But then when I met with Jim House, the book carver, the book coach that I worked with, I am a certified life and business coach already, and I had been coaching for a living. And he said, we should write this book in a way that you could use it as a tool if you wanted to do a workshop or a retreat or whatever. And so we came up with, he said, what was the process you went through? And we spent 2 days in a room going through it. And then I basically developed this Thrive process. And so that was kind of what kept me from finishing the book, because the third part of it was actually writing this out. And that's the third part of the book, is the Thrive process. I go through each one of the acronym. So Thrive stands for trust yourself, honor your feelings, remain present, invest in yourself. And that isn't necessarily financially as much as time, and vow to act, and embrace the learning.
Oh, vow to act.
So there's a chapter on each one of those, and that's the third section of the book. And it's really a bit of a roadmap to help anybody who's grieving anything. I mean, I remember during COVID, I wrote a blog post about the fact that the whole world is grieving right now. We all need the Thrive process because of everything that's happened. So,
my gosh, you have so many messages through your book. That's just wonderful. Did writing the blog and the book help you with your grieving process?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been a writer since I knew how to write. Basically, I've written my entire life. I have a degree in English and English literature, and writing has been. Right now I work as a copywriter, a ghostwriter. So I love to write, and most of the time I can write my feelings better than I can express them, verbally. I remember I was in counseling one time, and he was having to keep a journal, and I would read him my journal entries, and he actually the counselor said to me, I've never met anybody who can express their feelings in writing, that well. And a lot of times I just feel like it's kind of just coming out of me, it's almost like a third party writing through me kind of thing. And so it definitely helped me process, and sharing it on social, which I did from the beginning with my husband's permission, also really was affirming and mostly positive. I mean, except for some of the comments. And I actually literally did have someone reach out to me on Facebook Messenger one time. I worked in the direct sales industry, and I was a trainer in the home party plan industry. And so, they're always selling their stuff. And someone actually reached out to me in my messenger messages and said, I'm praying for your husband. I'm really sorry for what you're going through, but I do want to tell you, based on your most recent pictures, that I'm really concerned about the toll that your husband's cancer is taking on your face.
Oh.
And I have a cream that I could sell you that will help. And I mean, I had to laugh. It was just like, and I also had people reach out and say, God wants me to tell you. And my husband, I would always say, you should just stop reading after that. Like, seriously, don't.
Is that what that person said?
What?
Is that what that person said?
Well, not the person. There were two different. The one person did say, I'm concerned about the toll that your husband's cancer is taking on your face, and your face is your fortune because you're a trainer, so you really need my cream to fix your face.
God, I would never.
I literally responded and said, I'm actually really love my face. Thank you. I'm good. But the other woman said, God has told me that he's not happy with how you're sharing your journey. You're not giving enough glory. And I basically said, let me tell you something. God should be happy I'm not talking about him, because I'm pissed off at him. And I don't think he'd want to hear what I have to say. So you should be glad I'm not bringing God up in any of this, in any of the things I write. But for the most part,
oh my God,
I also had a lot of people giving me all kinds of advice about, like,
I'm sorry that you had to experience that. I really am.
I opened myself up to it because I shared publicly, and I knew that, and I dealt with it, and it wasn't a big deal. But, for the most part, knowing that
it is a big deal.
I mean, it is a big deal. It is. But again, I invited it because I shared publicly, but I also got a ton of support. We had thousands, literally thousands, because at the time I had a following of almost 5,000 people because I used it for my work, the Facebook. So, we had people praying for us. We had people sending, positive vibes. I would post, get all this love and support, and it really made a difference. Plus, I had people tell me, this is making a difference in my life. One woman said, we sit around our dinner table and we talk about what you share, and you and John. And my 17-year-old daughter told me last night at dinner, that's the kind of love I'm holding out for, Mom. That's the kind of, or people would say it's made me appreciate my spouse more. And I really pay attention to, how lucky I am that they're here. And I mean, I feel like that's a really important, it's worth the bullshit I had to deal with.
Yeah, but think of all these people and how you've affected them in such fabulous ways. And it's just like that ripple that goes on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah, it feels like it for sure. And that was, if what I said or did could make a difference, I'm happy about that.
I always felt with what I went through, if I could help one person, it made all the angst worth it, because that is such a brutal, suffocating grief. It just is. It really is.
It's true.
So that's good. So sharing your story has been very beneficial for you.
It has. I wouldn't do it any other way. I really wouldn't. It definitely has.
What advice would you give to someone considering writing a book about their own loss?
It's hard. It's probably going to be the hardest thing you'll ever do. Every time I had a writing session, there was also a pile of Kleenex on my desk.
Kleenex?
Kleenex from
Kleenex.
Kleenex. Yeah, tissues, I guess they are. But also I will say that it's one of the best things I've ever done, because now I have this physical manifestation of what I went through, the biggest thing I ever went through or ever probably will go through in my life.
And that will impact and help so many people.
Hopefully, if I can get the book out there to more people, it definitely will. I mean, I feel like could be a bestseller book if I would give it the promotional due that it deserves.
I think you're going to start taking steps in that direction now.
I know, I do. I definitely do. And I'm semi-retired now. I have the time to do it. And, I have a daughter who's an amazing branding and web developer expert, and she's offered to
She can
help.
help you.
I do have a beautiful website, actually. The pictures on that website don't really look like me anymore because it was before I let my hair go gray, and I've lost 50 pounds since they were taken. But it's called weatheringthegriefstorm.com, just the title of the book. And so she did that website for me. It needs to be updated, but it is, it has the book, has the links to order it and all that.
Okay. We're going to close this up, but we will put your links on the bottom of the video before it goes up. And also, what other things would you like to share that I didn't ask about you, your journey, your book, anything that you would like to add?
I mean, you had a really great curated list of questions. I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
I think I would just say that, if it's something that you're going through now, just take the next possible step. And the next possible step might be that you take a bath and bawl for an hour. It might be that you call a friend and say, I just need you to come sit with me and not say anything.
And that's just take up space.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think you have to trust yourself is the very first step in the Thrive process. And it's the most important one. Your spirit, your higher self, whatever, however you look at it, knows what you need in any given moment. If you can tap in and listen, and really listening to your intuition is hard to do, especially when you have a lot of outside input and people saying, well, you should be over this by now. Or, that type of thing. And so I think the most important thing is just sometimes I would just stop and say, what is the next step I can take right now? What do I need right now? And if you can just do that for long enough, I'm not going to say it doesn't go away. It doesn't necessarily fade. I mean, the intensity of my grief is sometimes the same in the moment as it was in the moment that he died, but not as often. And it definitely does get better. Time does give you some perspective, and it makes it so that it's not as brutally just like heart-stabbingly difficult as it will be in the beginning. And knowing that for me, that if I could make it to a year and then 2 years and then that helped a little bit. And it was like, it's not going to feel like this forever. And it isn't going to feel like this forever. You're still going to grieve. You're still going to have moments, but it's not, I remember the first time I went a whole day without really thinking about my late husband much, or like the next day I thought, why? Or we were somewhere for his birth. Oh no, we were in Europe. We just got back from Europe. My husband and I took a trip, a 3-week long adventure. And we were in Europe on the day, the 27th, 28th of October that John was diagnosed. And ordinarily that anniversary has been a really big thing for me. October itself is kind of a crappy month, but it passed. It passed. And I remember thinking on the 29th, oh my gosh, it didn't even dawn on me yesterday. Now, to be fair, we were in Europe and, it's like, if it's Tuesday, we must be in, Switzerland or whatever. But also that really wouldn't have made any difference in year 1 or year 2 or probably even year 3. But this time around, and sometimes even, like his birthday, the anniversary of his death, and unfortunately he died on Super Bowl Sunday, the 7th of February. And so sometimes it actually falls on Super Bowl Sunday, and I'm a football fan, but this only happened once since he died, but the time that it happened, that was really, really, really tough.
Really rough.
Yeah. And anniversaries are always going to feel that way, definitely. But there will come a time when it will not be this hard. I do promise that.
I remember someone telling me that who had also suffered a really tragic loss. And I thought, when's it going to happen? When am I going to start to feel better?
There is no when.
No. But I will tell you, it's been 4 years, and this is the first year that I felt joy and happiness. It took 4 years before I felt joy and happiness. Not just going through the motions.
That brings up a good point too, because one of the other things that I realized as I was processing this whole grief storm was it's possible to hold joy and grief in the same space at the same time. And I remember the first time I really felt joyful, I was in a Costco parking lot of all things, and I was with a friend, and we were taking the cart out to the car, and I did like kids do, and I jumped on the cart and I was riding it, and I have a picture. She took a picture, And I remember thinking, oh my God, it's like the time I was dancing. I feel good.
Yeah.
And also, I'm still devastatingly sad.
Yes.
And you can hold both those things at the same time. And it's okay to do that. It's totally okay. Joy and pain can coexist.
Yeah. Just those little moments, and they're so special.
Exactly. Yeah.
Julie, I want you to start promoting yourself. Not that it matters what I want, but I hope you do, because I think you have a great message to share.
Thank you.
And
I
you,
agree. You're right.
and you carry yourself well too. So,
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I was a public speaker. I made a living doing that for a while. So I would hope that I can do an interview. Fairly well.
There, my dogs are coming to say hi.
You're like, get off of YouTube, Mom. Well, I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm always happy to come and talk about this stuff. And this is one of the first times I've done an interview that I didn't cry, which that's progress.
That's a milestone.
Well,
we will love to have you come. And to my viewers, if you like the content, please subscribe, like, and share. And you will be seeing more of Julie. Thank you, Julie, so very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay.